Well, what's been interesting is we've been working for 3 or 4 months only, and there's about 10 architectural firms, of which we're one, and we're sort of collaborating together, is to first of all, to look at the structure, the political structure of Paris, to realize that actually what we think Paris is only the center. There's a much bigger area outside, which is not well coordinated between the center. We are looking at the transportation problems. You know, how do we get better public transport? Now, Paris has some of the best public transport of any city. It's also some of the most historic buildings. You know, so it's quite complicated, that balance. We're looking at how it's got some very serious social problems. Architecture is about, again, asking me about architecture before, but architecture is very much about how you give social inclusion, as well as the art of architecture, as well as the environmental complexities that we live in today. In other words, sustainability. And so in Paris, we're seeing how we can apply those concepts to Paris. And Paris has some, like every city, has some morally serious problems, but so does London. But I have been for many years advisor, first of all, to Tony Blair and his government in terms of what you could call looking at the state of the cities towards an urban renaissance. It's a big report, which has become the main political Labour Party report for the development of cities. And that has been very interesting. And now, for the last 10 years, first of all, I've been working with the Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, and now I'm working for the new Mayor, Boris Johnson. I was the Chief Advisor on Architecture and Urbanism, well, first to Ken Livingstone, and now I am to Boris. I work with the Greater London Council. I have a team there. I spend half a day a week to maybe a day a week there because my main work is in my office. And we have been doing some sort of certain work. We've been doing, for instance, London is increasing by 1 million people over the next 15 years. We have one of the key things, and this has also came out in the government policy, is you only build in London on where there is derelict sites. We don't expand London, we densify, we intensify London around transportation hubs to encourage movement by public transport, discourage going by car. Congestion zones, which means you pay when you go into the center of London a penalty to going inside, which goes to public transport. We build 50% of all housing development has to be affordable and social housing. We create a situation where public transport is beginning to compete with Paris. Paris has much better public transport than London has. We're creating a lot of new public spaces, a whole network of pedestrian areas. We recognize that people, pedestrians and on bicycles, are more than people who go by car. Yet there's no such thing as a traffic engineer, which is specialized in pedestrians. All traffic engineers are specialized in cars. We're saying, no, we must have traffic engineers that are experts in the whole question of walking, things like this. So we're trying to make a more humanistic city. That's the real critical. How the Renaissance was the height, if you like, of the humanistic city. Of course, so was Hellenic Greece. So it's not the first time. And what we're saying is we also should be able to create not just a city where the strongest person wins, which usually is with a car, but where every individual, the poor as well as the rich, have a right. A city for all people, all ages, all creeds. That's what we're working towards, a humanist city. We're working, I mean, it's a very complicated, because obviously it was a terrible destruction. So there's a tremendously emotional feeling in that area, which is understanding. If you live in that area, you may have lost family, and you certainly saw the demolition of a massive building. Two different buildings. So there is a sort of built-in sort of complexity about the spirit of the people who live there. On the other hand, we have to replace that. So in those buildings, there's a big memorial garden. That's the center of this. That's not my design. But there's a big, and then there are these towers around it. I'm doing one of these towers. Like all high buildings, it attempts to communicate. I'm very much about communicating the process of construction. In other words, how you make things. You can see how that you make things. So this one here, again, like buildings that reach for the sky, so you can see the structure, how it works. As you can see the structure in the wonderful dome by Brunelleschi here, you can see internally how the structure works. Of course, I'm not comparing the two architects. I'm talking about the same aims. I think Italy is very, very complicated. I have done at least should think 5 or 6 projects in Florence, and I've certainly done some 20 projects in Italy, of which Scandicci is probably going to be the first one, which we hopefully will build with. And it's been, yes, exactly. You have to, it is a battle to build here. We have found it a battle to build here, and that's partly to do because the history lies heavily upon the society, and we have to decide whether Italy is going to be a museum or a living country. And there is a question here about, and I'm pro-continuity, I'm pro-conservation. The other part is, I think Italy is not blessed with governments which want to actually carry out actions, not humanistic actions. I'm going to talk about this in this lecture, but basically it's about the complexity of cities and how I believe there's both a continuity, but there's also a realization that every period is modern in its time. When they built Palazzo Vecchio, it was very modern. When they built Vasari's extension, 500 years later, it was very modern. There's always been a continuity, but the critical part is to design well. So I believe cities are critical in terms of climate change, sustainability, as well as socially. It's where you meet, it's the melting pot, it's where you lose all the class distinctions, where you lose where the rich and the poor mix together. So I see the city as being the heart of society. The city is the economic engine, but more important, it's also the heart of culture.